My guest today is Jamaica's leader of the opposition party, the Honorable Mark Golding. Mark, welcome. How you doing?
I'm well. Nice to be with you, Eddie.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
You inherited a party in disarray, but you've managed to bring it together, unify the party, ready for local elections. You did win the popular vote. How ready is the party now for the general elections?
I would say we're in an advanced state of readiness. We have been working at this from February last year to identify our candidates. And we're over 90% there, I think. There are a few constituencies that we're trying to sort out, but vast majority are already settled. And in terms of the organization, because we have been through a protracted campaign for the local government elections where the government kept putting it back and putting it back. They postponed it 3 times. So we had to be preparing for that. And that has assisted us, I think, to get our organization in a stronger state. And we continue to work at it. So, we're doing training and we're doing audits and all that kind of thing on an ongoing basis to ensure that when the time comes, we're able to deliver the victory.
Yeah, right. Now, I know your role as the opposition party is to oppose, but in your mind, if you took office today, what policy or program that you would say the government is doing it well, this is something I want to continue?
Well, in Jamaica, we've, by consensus, established continuity around, I would say, fiscal discipline, the idea of ensuring that the public finances are on a sustainable footing, that the debt of the country is under control. We initiated that in earnest in 2013 and delivered a series of reforms which have been continued since. And that, I think, is a major achievement for Jamaica, because when we came into office in 2013, the public debt of the country was around 147% of GDP. It was a very high ratio. And as a result, too much of the resources of the country were being used to service debt. And through sacrifice and steadfastness, the country has managed to bring that down to, I think it was in March 2024, just the other day, it was at 72%. And there's a legislated target to take it to 60%. And we are committed to that as well. In fact, we're the ones who put it in the law. So, I would say there's bipartisan acknowledgement that this is something that Jamaica needs to stay the course on. And apart from that, many programs of government are things that are worked out over long lifespans with the input of international development partners and that sort of thing. And those are typically continue from administration to administration. On the other hand, of course, there are many things that change of government would be as an opportunity, and will be an opportunity, to bring a different emphasis, a different set of priorities, and maybe a different approach. And so, those are the things where the political orientation of the party that has assumed office will manifest itself in a new day. Right. And so, so it's a mixed bag, really.
Right. One of the things that I could never have this conversation and we don't talk about it is the issue of crime.
Yeah.
There is word that crime rate is going down, but somehow it seems to be always high on the list. When you speak to people in the diaspora, they said they would not go back to Jamaica because of the crime. But yet when I visit, you see a functioning country and people are enjoying themselves, people are working. What, in your estimation, is the real reason for the high rate of crime, and how would you control it?
I think it's a long-standing problem that has gotten worse over decades. And in terms of the main drivers, I think the inequality in the society is part of the problem, where you have a few people in Jamaica who are doing extremely well, and you have a large base that struggle to survive. And in between is a relatively narrow middle class who also are finding it harder and harder to survive. And in that environment, you get a lot of youths who come through the education system, and the education system has not been delivering as it should. So we have, unfortunately, much too high a percentage of children who go through school and end up really not having anything in terms of subjects that would enable them to pursue employment in the formal sectors. And a lot of those youngsters end up being attracted to, I would say, antisocial behaviors and criminal behaviors, and they feed the so-called gangs and so on. So that's a problem that needs to be addressed. I think we have to look at family life, how children are being brought up, what's the deficiencies in the early childhood education system and primary school system, and get those areas fixed. Nutrition for our children, and values and attitudes taught in school, the messages and teachings of Marcus Garvey to instill pride in ourselves and awareness of our greatness. All of this is important to mold the young Jamaican mind as one that can be a productive citizen, that believes in him or herself and wants to achieve what they can through honest work. And so, in terms of crime and violence, the solutions are multifaceted, but I think the core of it is what I just described. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are also law enforcement issues around tactics and legislation and capacity building in the police force in particular to help them to be more effective in dealing with crime. But those are more responses to a situation rather than a solution to the problem. The solution lies, I think, in social and economic measures targeting the areas of weakness in our society.
Right. Now, the other issue I wanted to just get your feedback on is corruption in government. That seems to have been a long-standing problem that's affecting Jamaica's progress. How would you respond to fixing that situation?
I think that's a problem which has gotten much worse since this government assumed office in 2016. And if you look at their track record, it's really appalling in terms of the many, many scandals and incidents of nepotism and graft and cronyism. And the Prime Minister himself is in a tenuous situation because his Integrity Commission filings have not been certified for a number of years. And they're supposed to be certified and then published, and they haven't been. So it puts him in an invidious position to talk about corruption because his own house is not in order. In terms of how we deal with it, institutionally, I think we have a robust framework with the Integrity Commission that was developed. When I was Minister of Justice, I was the architect of that, brought that legislation to Parliament. It's consolidated a number of agencies that were fragmented before, and it's given them powers of information sharing and receiving across government, across law enforcement and tax, local and internationally as well. And it has prosecutorial powers of its own. And they came into existence in 2018, and they've been finding their feet over time. So I don't think the problem is so much the institutional framework, but there has been some amount of political reaction to their work. And we've heard a lot of comments in Parliament from various parliamentarians trying to neuter their powers. And I think that would be something that we have to ensure does not happen. We need to enable them to do their work and empower them to do their work. And they also, I think, need to understand where, what is a serious issue, what is a relative minor issue, and treat them, in proportionate terms. But overall, I think that the institutional framework is sound, but it just needs resources and support so it can do its work effectively. We also have MOCA, which is a major organized crime and anti-corruption agency, which is a specialist agency that was established again when we were in office and has been given legislative support now. And that's an important agency that supports the work of the Integrity Commission in terms of the law enforcement side of it. So, as I said, the architecture is there. It's just a question of enabling them to do their work, giving them the necessary resources. And also, I think, the leadership of the country has to set an example, as to how it conducts itself. It must be intolerant of any kind of evidence or manifestations of, improper conduct among the political directorate, ministers and junior ministers and parliamentarians generally, and set the tone that this is not going to be tolerated. And that's something that I feel quite strongly about, and would intend to try and pursue that line, because the problem with corruption, of course, is that the population as a whole loses trust and confidence in the leadership of the country, and it breeds cynicism, and it undermines hope. So it's very important that the right tone is set at the top so that the country as a whole has confidence in the leadership of the country.
Now, the Jamaican Diaspora, the People's National Party, your party has reached out to the diaspora. A couple of years ago, you've had tours of the U.S. East Coast and Canada, the U.K. How do you envision leveraging the diaspora to contribute to Jamaica's development?
We see the diaspora really as part of the country, part of Jamaica. I mean, I don't really think Jamaica can be just seen as an island with a geographic construct. The culture and the people of Jamaica are what make up Jamaica, and they're all over the world. And indeed, I mean, I don't know the precise numbers, but it is said that, as many Jamaicans live outside as live within the shores of Jamaica. So that is a tremendous asset that we ought to try and maximize for the benefit and development of the country. And the question is, how do we do that? So why I've been quite energetically seeking to engage the diaspora is because I recognize that part of the solution to Jamaica's many challenges is to bring on board people who can contribute in a meaningful and positive way to solving those problems. And many of those people live outside Jamaica. And now, one area where I think we could make quick progress is in the area of public boards of public sector agencies that need good leadership. And we have well over 100 public boards, and that doesn't even include school boards and so on, and that need persons to be members of the board to provide that kind of accountability and leadership to those agencies. And I would like to see our diaspora Jamaicans participating in that. There are some regulations that now require you to submit your name into a database of potential persons who could be appointed, and with your CV, your resumes, and so on, and that makes you eligible to be appointed to public boards. And I want to encourage as many of our diaspora Jamaicans who have an interest in serving that way to do that, to put their names forward so that they would be available to us to be appointed to these boards.
And I know people would be willing, but what's the process? Where would we first go to even start that process?
It's being administered through the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. So the first step, I think, is to go to their website and see what it has to say about how you get into the database to become a potential director or a member of a public board, and you take it from there. And of course, nowadays, with the advances in communications and information technology, one doesn't have to be physically present to participate in a board meeting. So it lends itself to expanding the cohort and being more inclusive of our Jamaicans. There are other issues, of course, about representation, those are constitutional issues. We would like to see as a first step the expansion of the Senate to facilitate diaspora representation in the Senate of the country. That will require bipartisan support because those provisions in our Constitution are deeply entrenched, so that you can't really move forward unless you have both parties represented in Parliament supporting it. So I'm hoping that the Jamaica Labour Party will be mindful to embrace that. And then there's the whole question of the lower house, the House of Representatives. That's a more tricky one because in our system, in order to vote, you have to be registered in a constituency in Jamaica to vote for the candidate to become the MP. And how that would work in our context with persons who live outside needs to be thought through. But I'm aware, for example, France, I believe, and I think I heard another country that does this.
Venezuela does it as well.
Where they created a constituency for the diaspora. And so diaspora persons vote for this notional constituency that then whoever is elected sits in the parliament as an additional constituency. And we could look at doing that as well. But again, these are things that require bipartisan support because the existing arrangements are in the Constitution in a way that makes it very difficult to change unless you have everybody on board.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned culture. Our culture is so vibrant. Our athletes. We recently had the Marley movie just breaking box record.
Yeah.
How then do you plan to harness this power of this vibrant culture, the athletes, the sports, and promote national unity and drive economic growth?
Well, I do think if you look at our economy, it has been characterized by relatively low levels of economic growth over a long period of time. And part of the problem, I think, is that we're not sufficiently exploring how the culture, and when I use the word culture broadly, to include sports and entertainment, how we can take advantage of our natural prowess in these areas, the talents that we have, the vibrancy of our culture, which you mentioned, and its international appeal. You know, my constituency is South St. Andrew. Trenchtown is in my constituency. And so the Whalers formed in my constituency, and I have a strong interest. And in fact, the movie you just mentioned, some of it was filmed in Trenchtown. So I believe that there's a lot that can be done to develop the cultural assets and provide opportunities for Jamaicans to make money from them and to take it to the world in various ways. We haven't really got our act together over the years in supporting that. So even in my own constituency, I can give you an example. There's the building in which Bob and Bonnie Whaler were living when they formed the Whalers on 2nd Street. It's one of the original government yard buildings. And it is in a very dilapidated condition. The people have been living in there. And I've been working with others on a project to get the residents to move to another location where they would live, and then restoring that building as a Whalers Museum. Mm-hmm. But I've had a consistent fight from the authorities and got just delay after delay in very basic things that, giving us permission to use a nearby site which is unoccupied. I had an arrangement with Food for the Poor to build some houses there so they could just move across the road and free up the building. Just haven't been able to make progress because the authorities were not supportive of it, even although they didn't say that they're not supportive of it, but they won't do what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm just giving that as an example of how if we don't, rally around these things and have a positive mental approach to us, and we can thwart opportunities that are real, So on a broader level, I think that our sports, we need to look at what works. We have tremendous achievements in track and field. Why is that? And why is it that in the last 30 years we've seen so much improvement? Mm-hmm. We've always been talented from way back with Herb McKinley and that. But the levels of domination in sprint, that's a relatively new phenomenon in the last, say, 20 years.
And locally trained as well.
Locally trained. Right. And the truth is that G.C. Foster College, which was given to us by the Cubans as a gift, that has trained coaches that have been gone out into the school system at the primary and secondary level right across the country in every nook and cranny. And so we have a proper track program in the schools that can develop our basic prowess and talents in that area. We need to look at that in other areas of sports, football and others, cricket and what have you. And we can see that, if we get our act together, we can really make significant progress. Even in professional football in Jamaica now, over the last 3 or 4 years, we have managed to make significant progress in professionalizing and marketing our Premier League. And if that effort continues and gets the necessary support from the private sector and the government, I think that we can start to really see Jamaica emerge as a source of players that will play in major clubs all over the world, which is already happening, but I think it can intensify, and that can generate a lot of revenue for the country and for those individuals, and provide another career path for youths who may not be, academically inclined.
So we talk about culture, we talk about reggae music. Mm-hmm. Share with us your favorite reggae song.
I'm a music man, you know. So I don't have a single song that I could tell is my favorite. But the Wailers catalog as a whole is something that I deeply connect with, you know. And I couldn't tell you one song. There are many, but the catalog as a whole that it came out of Trenchtown and it really put Jamaican music on the international map at a level which it had before, you know, with Ska had, you know, really small did their thing and the others, but the Wailers really took it to a whole new level. So I have to big up the Wailers and the catalog.
And I love the fact that you speak of the Wailers, you know, as the group, and not just one or, you know. So and Marley has his place for sure. But the Wailers and the Wailers catalog.
Well, that is a source. I mean, you know, Bob, of course, is a genius. I've already said, as far as I'm concerned, he must be being a national hero. You know, he has had such a huge impact across the world in many different ways, you know, as a force of inspiration for oppressed people, for liberation movements, you know, as a person who spreads a message of love and unity, all of these things. And as a, you know, a person who has helped to take Rastafari across the world as a religion that came out of Jamaica, you know. So Bob to me is but Peter and Bonnie are also great. You know, and I mean, we could talk in equal terms if we had the time on both of them. Right. So, and you know, I that's why I mentioned the Wailers.
I'm sure you have then a favorite Jamaican food.
Well, right now, you know, I like steamed fish. A steamed fish cooked down with some okra and pumpkin, you know, and maybe have it with some steamed bami. Or if I can get one or two festival, Helsha style, you know, I might think that one.
Right. As we close this out, this conversation up, and, you know, with your role as leader of the opposition and all that you do, when it's time to take a break, what's your favorite leisure activity?
Wow. I read voraciously. You know, I'm in a position that I need to keep abreast of what's going on, not just at home, but all over the place. So I have to spend some time reading. Fortunately, I enjoy doing that. I also like reading novels. I mean, things that have nothing to do with current events. But so I'm a reader. I like movies. I like watching films and good series. And you know, nowadays we have Netflix and many others that gives us the opportunity to do that at home. You know, so I must say I enjoy that. And then, of course, going out and being in nature, you know, I love being by the sea or by the rivers or in the mountains, just enjoying Mother Nature. And, you know, I hope that we will collectively have the will to protect our natural environment, and especially in this era of global warming and all the problems that we're seeing coming down the pike. We need to be very vigilant and aware of that. And, you know, I think an appreciation of nature gives us the passion that we need to tackle this very real problem.
Mark Golden, leader of Jamaica's opposition party, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Now we have a busy schedule here in South Florida.
Yeah, man.
And thanks for talking.
Thanks for having me, Eddie. And, you know, big up all your listeners and viewers here in South Florida and wherever you may be. I'm sure you're all over the world. So it's been a pleasure to have this discussion with Eddie. And, you know, time is limited, but you got a flavor. And, you know, we look forward to doing this again in due course.
Sure.
So respect and thanks. Yeah, man.
Conversation with leader of the opposition, Mark Golden, his brief visit here in South Florida. Steamed fish. Yes. My name is Eddy Edwards. See you next time right here.
Man, thank you.
All right.